So, although it's hot, we're going to begin with some hot meditation. So, sit comfortably. Try to place your attention on the respiration. Try to let go of the outer distractions, perhaps produced by your distraction to the sense bases, the objects of your senses. And especially the inner distractions, the conceptualizing minds, discursive thought. Let them go and just focus on the breathing. Then withdraw your attention further inside to your mental consciousness. Let go of your attention, mindfulness of the breathing. Now try to recognize the nature of the mental consciousness and use that as your object of observation. Letting go of thoughts again and again. Try to get a experience of the clear light nature of the mind, the mental consciousness, take that very subtle object as your focus. No matter what the variety of appearances are to your mind, that which is continuous is this clear light nature. Recognizing this as my potential, conventional Buddha nature, the clear light nature of the mind. Think how fortunate I am to recognize this now, although it's something which I've had all sentient beings have possessed since beginningless time. We don't recognize it. We don't recognize the potential to let go of negativity, to generate virtuous thoughts in our mind, completely different thoughts. Right now I have a very fortunate situation of a human rebirth where I've met the teachings that still are vibrant, community that practices. The 8 conditions of leisure, the 10 richnesses, are very difficult to come by. We have them now. Everything that's needed to really practice the Dharma. We don't need to be rich or have a condominium or have many friends or be famous in order to practice the Dharma. This situation, although ideal to practice the Mahayana, is impermanent. With every second, it's decaying away. It's as though I'm falling through time to my eventual death, and quite possibly rebirth in the lower realms. While I have the opportunity to benefit myself and others this period, rather than wasting it on meaningless activities, simply that have repercussions only in this lifetime, using up perhaps virtue from the past, creating non-virtuous actions that will ripen in the future. To avoid that, to seek a way out of samsara further, to have the guidance to be able to even practice the Mahayana, to develop an altruistic, incredible mind that works for the welfare of others. Requires guidance of the Buddha, the Dharma, the actual teachings, the Sangha. And all of it begins with an understanding of how to rely on the spiritual guide. So with a thought of the various motivations of the various individuals of lower scope, medium scope, and great scope, to avoid suffering of the lower realms in the next lifetime, to actually escape from samsara, to achieve enlightenment for the sake of all living beings who are, like ourselves, helpless and hopeless in cyclic existence right now. I'm going to listen to the teachings tonight on the stages of the path. To try to actualize them, to leave an imprint in my mind, to practice them, hear, contemplate, meditate. Great path that has been followed by many, many great beings before us, all the way to its culmination. So then relax, bring your attention back to the present. Everyone's getting up. So, who is going to surprise me and have a question? All right. Eric, do you have a question? Yeah. Leo.
It's much more general than the Lam Rim specifically, but it's something that's been nagging at me for a long time. The usage in Buddhism of lists, the Four Noble Truths, the Eightfold Path, all of it.
Lists?
Lists.
I thought you said lisps.
It's a question I've asked a lot, and is that indicative of sort of an Eastern approach to logic and memorization and stuff, or is that unique to Buddhism, or does that come from India? I know it has nothing to do with the Lam Rim, but
Well,
Seem wise.
I think it's probably common to a lot of religions that were transmitted orally at earlier times, because in order to have an understanding of some philosophical system, the various, defining characteristics, you could say, could be listed, could be pointed out, could be enumerated. And that's kind of the flavor very much. People, when they talk about the Abhidharma, you know what the Abhidharma is, right? You know what Abhidharma is? Have you ever been to Thailand?
Yeah.
Or Burma? So, in the Theravada countries, there are sort of different monks, different lifestyles. Some monks are more, I'm not sure what they call them, Abhidharmikas maybe, or Abhidharma studiers. They're more scholastics, and so they know all of these lists as you're referring to. But the lists, as opposed to say the forest monks, who on the surface don't look like they spend so much time studying these kinds of sort of scholastic things, but actually they're actual meditators, those who actually are, practitioners, real practitioners. They study and they practice, so they do know these things. Like, for instance, when we study and we try to meditate on the Lam Rim, let's say if you try to if I ask, we're going to ask Frank, what are the 8 freedoms that are, there's supposed to be 8 freedoms or states of leisure, and 10 richnesses or endowments that are characteristics of the perfect human rebirth, life of leisure endowment. So if you were meditating on that, Frank would be able to enumerate them to himself, such as, what would they be, Frank? Do you know from other?
Leisure or the...
Yeah, let's say the 8 leisures first. Oh, we'll just take 8 leisures right now.
8 leisures. Well, would be, I'm guessing that time is a leisure.
Oh, okay, so you don't, this doesn't ring a bell with you. Maybe you haven't studied this before. Who's studied this before? Brother Don, maybe?
I think not being born is a hell being, a prey to being,
Not being born in the hells,
Demigod or
not being born
God.
as a hunger ghost, not being born as what?
demigod or a god.
Demigod, God. Let's see.
Not being born as a time the Buddha has come.
So also animal, I guess, isn't there, right?
Yeah, I guess
Okay.
not born. Is that
Yeah.
the time when the Buddha has come? Not being born in a barbarian land. Let's see. Do you really know?
So,
A barbarian.
so here's a good illustration. We haven't studied those in this course, but some of you may have heard Lam Rim teachings before. So it's just like, for instance, when I ask, what are the 10 paths of non-virtue? Sometimes people jump around. Well, let's see, killing, and then slander, and they sort of, maybe they can't remember everything because they haven't memorized them in such a way that they can be brought to mind. Sometimes just the act of memorization acts as some kind of, well, you can memorize, you can remember it. You can from one point you can remember the next one by having memorized them, and they sort of follow on one another. Even if you didn't, even you just start to say the first one. Sometimes we start to say a prayer and we know the prayer because we've memorized it. We've said it many times. So that's very useful when you're meditating. It's not only a scholastic device or something for the the philosophers or the Abhidharmikas or whatever. It's also a device for meditation. And I've mentioned on many occasions, in our Western culture, we kind of demean rote learning, right? Learning by rote. It's almost like, oh, that's not so creative. We want the people to be able to have some more some in-depth experience or something. But but perhaps the people who go too far and don't recognize the value of that, because in the past, those who practiced Buddhism would memorize these lists and memorize the teachings. Sometimes it'd just be the sutras; they'd memorize the sutras, or if the subject matter was amenable to listing, they would memorize the lists that can act, kind of like what is called in the teachings a dharani. Do you know what dharani means? Have you ever heard that term? Diana, do you know what dharani is?
I've heard the term, I can't remember.
Like the long dharani of Avalokiteshvara. Sometimes it sounds like a mantra. Dharani sometimes can mean retention, that by which you retain some meaning. So sometimes it's just a succession of syllables or a list. So the shortcuts, sometimes there are root texts, so some great texts, just a bunch of the main points as syllables or just words. Sometimes it doesn't even make any sense if you just sounds like a bunch of syllables. But if you've received a teaching on that, it's like having laid down the bricks of a fence or a huge fort, and the commentary is like putting the mortar in between the stones so that they can have some interconnectiveness. So I think it's something that we don't. Well, maybe we do. I don't know. What do lawyers have to memorize, or doctors have to memorize lists, right? Anyone here? Carrie, did you go through some medical training? Do you have to memorize lots of the knee bone? How's that? Something bones connected to. something more sophisticated than that, right? I can't remember which one that is. Okay, so yeah, does that help a little?
Yeah, it does. I understand the value of it and everything. I guess what sometimes it's a little frustrating because there will be a reference in Geshe Soquel's commentary, on the six something or other, or the five, and it would be great if there was a book of Buddhist lists.
Well, what you can do, yeah, there are various books like that.
Are there really?
Yeah. I was looking for the same thing just recently.
So there are some.
Share my experiences with you.
Oh, good.
So what you could do, you begin your own list,
Yeah.
and so you have all the ones and the twos. What would be the twos? What kind of twos are there?
The two truths.
Two truths.
Conventional and ultimate knowledge.
Pardon?
Conventional and ultimate.
Right. That's two truths. And then maybe there's some other twos you can think of. And what kind of threes can you think of?
Three poisons.
Suffering.
Three poisons, three kinds of suffering,
Three
three jewels. Okay, and then you get up to fours. Four noble truths. So you can make your own. You can make your own list, and with Pat's help, maybe you can publish for the class. Okay. So how about the actual material that we've been studying so far? Yeah, Diana.
I have a question in the 10 qualities of a teacher.
Mhm.
If you could explain the distinction between the two wisdoms that are listed.
Okay, so we'll be coming to that today, but we can start off with that. So that's where are you looking on? Which page?
Page 72.
So there is when we talk about relying on a spiritual friend, on guru devotion, it's not enough just to follow anyone just because they're famous or they're called, Swami this or that, or Geshe this or that, or Lama this or that. You have to check the qualifications, and then you need something to check those qualifications against. What are said to be the proper qualities? So in one of the sutras expounded by the Buddha, by Maitreya actually, Sutra Alamkara, Mahayana Sutra Alamkara, he listed in there 10 qualities that we should find in a Mahayana spiritual friend. You know what the different terms that are almost synonymous. You know this term spiritual friend? You know what the Sanskrit is or what the Tibetan is? The Tibetan is Gewe Shenyan. Gewa means virtue, and Shenyan means friend, sort of like very close friend. It's all in Sanskrit. It's in fact in short, it's what we call geshe. You know, like the degree that in the Gelugpa tradition and some of the other traditions for learned scholars, they received this degree called geshe. It's actually short for Gewe Shenyan, which means virtuous friend. Gewa means virtue, just like when we say Gewa di nirdudag, due to these virtues, we act quickly, this or that. You understand, Michelle? Following?
This thing.
Okay. In Sanskrit, I think it's Kaliya Mitra. Mitra is a common. Do you know anyone with Mitra in their name? Mitra means like Vishwa. Was it? Vishwamitra. Mitra means kind of friend, and Kaliya means virtue. So that's a synonym of guru. It's in fact very often when we talk about advice from a spiritual friend, we're talking about someone who is the Mahayana spiritual friend. Mahayana spiritual friend could be called also guru. That's another word. You know what guru means, right? Guru comes from Sanskrit root. One of the etymologies is heavy, someone who is heavy in qualities, weighty. Maybe it's better nowadays. Everyone wants to be slim and light, so it doesn't sound good. Heavy, weighty in qualities. The Tibetans translate it as Lama, right? Lama. Lama doesn't mean monk. Do you think Lama means monk? What do you think it means, Lama? Yeah. Right.
I thought it meant more to do with teaching.
Lama is a Tibetan translation of guru. Actually means guru. And so in some cases, the word lama is used to refer to monks. I mentioned this on other occasions also, right? Sometimes in the village or in the town, the grandmother bringing the little grandchild out will say, when the monks come by, they say, bow to the lama. And Tibetan Buddhism was called by some Western scholars Lamaism. Kind of drives me crazy to hear that, but anyway. So Lama or Guru is more or less synonymous with Gewe Shenyan or Geshe. Geshe degree, of course, is a kind of title. I mean, someone is suitable to be kind of recognized as a spiritual friend, having received that training and finished it and so forth. In the Mahayana Sutra Alamkara by Maitreya, Ornament of Mahayana Sutras, it's one of the 5 texts that Maitreya taught to a Sangha, 5 texts of Maitreya. Maitreya mentions 10 qualities of the Mahayana Guru. So those are, there's on page 71, rely on a Mahayana teacher who is disciplined, serene, thoroughly pacified, has good qualities surpassing those of the students, is energetic, has a wealth of scriptural knowledge, possesses loving concern, has thorough knowledge of reality, means emptiness, and skill in instructing disciples, and has abandoned dispiritedness. So has given up being discouraged, in other words. So 2 of them that you're talking about, Diana, are which ones?
The thoroughly pacified and then thorough knowledge of reality.
Okay, so in the commentaries it mentions the first 3, disciplined, serene, and thoroughly pacified, refer to a teacher who has some development of the 3 higher trainings. So the discipline means they are adept at the higher training of Vinaya, of discipline. So their mind is already calmed due to not allowing themselves the sort of monkey mind to go off and engage in negative actions of mind and body and so forth. So their mind is pacified. Body and speech, mind are pacified to some degree. Serene refers to training in concentration, because by further, like when we try to bring our attention inward, you learn that you have to sort of pacify the discursive thoughts and the mind which is attracted to various kinds of thoughts in order to concentrate. So that brings about a serenity that, like when we talk about tranquil abiding, calm abiding. Have you heard that term, please? Tranquil abiding, you know what that is?
It's meditation.
It's kind of it's kind of a fully, if you attain calm abiding, it's a fully qualified, single-pointed concentration. So it's kind of the tool that allows you to meditate. In itself, it's just a tool. It's not an aim, and it's not an end in and of itself. And then he or she should be thoroughly pacified. They should be serene and thoroughly pacified. In the Tibetan, I think it says Shiwa and Newa Shiwa, Nershi, which refers to now a deeper kind of pacification, rather than simply being able to have single-pointed concentration and the mind and so forth are pacified. One has a higher training of wisdom. So in so doing, one is able to pacify many other kinds of, how do you say, delusions. For instance, with a path of concentration, can you actually abandon any of the delusions? Can you abandon the delusions with concentration alone? What do you think, Thea?
I think so, in the sense that I'm thinking along the lines of concentration meditation, where the mind becomes single pointed in its focus. And
So say without the wisdom of emptiness, if you have good concentration, you can abandon some of the delusions?
no, I think that combined with the realization of emptiness, therefore you have the 2 wings.
Yeah. Well, yeah, you could, I guess in some way you could call them 2 wings in this case. The concentration is in and of itself not capable, just the pacification that comes about by calming the mind that way, all it is able to accomplish is a temporary separation from the delusions. We say like separation from attachment. When you achieve the first concentration, I sort of go up like this. The first dhyana, or in Pali they call the first jhana. Have you heard that term? Jhanas? That's just the Pali way of writing dhyana. Dhyana, which dhyana means what? We say in Tibetan, we say samten, concentration. So simply achieving that, one temporarily separates from all of the attachment of the desire realm. So one's mind is very pacified if you achieve the first concentration, or the second concentration, or third concentration. You temporarily, you would, to yourself and to others, you would look like a great saint. But you haven't eliminated the delusions from the root. So over time, when that samadhi, that concentration, begins to diminish over some days, sometimes maybe an hour, you come out of the concentration and people are coming in, bringing you presents after your long retreat, and you get drunk, or who knows, start dancing and telling stories, and then your concentration could go just like that. Or it might go slowly. You try to practice over some weeks, months, but unless you've eliminated the delusions from the root, they will come again. So that kind of pacification, that serenity, is the second one. The third one, thoroughly pacified, refers to a thorough kind of pacification of the mind that comes about through wisdom. And the other one, when it talks about thorough knowledge of reality, is referring to not just the practice of higher training of wisdom, but actual realization, direct realization. In some of the commentaries refers to direct realization of emptiness. That would be the ideal Mahayana guru. Even if the guru didn't have a direct realization of emptiness, that means a thorough knowledge, to have a correct intellectual understanding. Boy, at this time, even to have a correct intellectual understanding of emptiness would be very, very rare and very, very precious. So they're referring to the same, more or less the same thing, except I think what does the commentary itself here say in Lama Tsongkhapa's commentary?
It says on 72, knowledge of reality refers to special training in wisdom, the knowledge of selflessness of phenomena.
Mm-hmm. And the first one? Thoroughly pacified?
Refers to having accomplished the training of wisdom. This is done by specifically analyzing the meaning of reality and dependence on meditative serenity, wherein the mind becomes serviceable.
So this means developing... So this means meditating, having the training in, meditating on emptiness with a concentration, which is a union of tranquil abiding and penetrative insight, whereas you may not actually have realized it yet. You're just training in it. So there's some distinction there. So any other question? We'll continue. Yeah, Luis.
We talked about, you mentioned dispiritedness, and you said that is having given up discouragement.
Well, yeah, we're going to talk about that in a little while. I was just wondering if anyone has any questions. Isn't that here? Yeah, that's in this. We haven't even gotten that far yet. Just from what we've done before, does anyone have any questions? No? Okay. So, let's see. How many outlines? Tom, do you know the outlines of the Lam Rim? 4 main outlines?
The greatness of the author to establish the noble origin, the greatness of the teaching to establish its authenticity, the way to listen and how to teach, and then the actual instructions.
Then the actual instructions, how to lead the disciple.
To the teacher, to the student.
Lead the disciple on the path. Right. But I'm impressed. I see, he's memorized. He studied. Good Anya, as they say down there. Okay, so we've gone over the first 2 outlines, and we're sort of in the middle of the third one. We were talking about and just to reiterate, the greatness of the teacher. Atisha had, for many, many lifetimes before his birth as the teacher, Atisha had been a great pundit, someone who had studied and practiced. That's kind of the meaning of pandita. Sometimes pandita just means scholar, but it means a scholar, practitioner. He had himself in that lifetime, because of his karma, who was born in a high caste, sought out and had the karma to meet great gurus from a very early age, was guided by them, and revivified his experiences that had been developed in previous lifetimes. So this is what, maybe for some of us, certainly for me, this is what we're doing right now, laying the seeds for future, practicing now, but laying the seeds to be able to have a continuity of lives and in some lifetime to be like Atisha, to have all of these imprints for many, many lifetimes. He was guided by various aspects of the Buddha. Tara in particular made predictions to him and guided him not to get married because like a great elephant that could get caught in a swamp, who could do great things, but it was very easy to get caught in the swamp and lose all his virtuous powers. He studied bodhicitta in great depth, went to enormous lengths to actually experience that for many, many months. The stories go 13 months, traveled by sea to Indonesia and studied with a great teacher there, and was one of the crown jewels of Indian Buddhism. He was invited to Tibet, and it's there that he composed a text called The Lamp of the Path to Enlightenment, which is more or less the Dharma teaching that is being referred to here when it's talking about the teaching, the Lamp of the Path to Enlightenment. It's kind of like Stages of the Path. Has anyone ever seen that? Have you seen the text, Lamp of the Path? Done? Yeah. Vimo, have you ever seen? No. Pat, you've got sunburn you haven't seen today. Did you go, you okay?
Yeah.
Okay. It is sunburn, isn't it?
What?
It's not like you got in a fight or something?
No, just
Okay,
sunburn.
okay.
Yeah, I got a fight with a bottle of UV and it won. It wouldn't open.
UV.
Yeah.
Okay. Ultraviolet. So when we talk about the qualities of the teachings, so these are these special qualities in order to show that the teachings are authentic. What were the things that were mentioned there? Carrie, do you remember? The second online?
I'm drawing a blank right now.
Greatness of the teaching. So that had 4 outlines. The greatness of enabling one to know that all the teachings are free of contradiction. That that allows you, the greatness that allows you to understand that all the scriptures are free, are for practice, are instruction, actual instructions for practice. It's not like some sutras are just sort of like, maybe you might say, oh, that's just for scholars. But everything that the Buddha taught was meant to be taken as instruction. It's not like you need to get some special personal instruction from some little gnarly, gnomish guru up on the mountain, you know. You studied all these texts for years and you think, oh, well, I don't know how to practice. That's what the Lam Rim would say. Well, there's a person who doesn't know really that all of the teachings that they have are meant to practice. They haven't learned how to do that. That's one of the special qualities of the Lam Rim, to be able to see whatever teaching you receive, how to put it into practice. Even how to read, even your everyday events, how to see everyday events as being amenable to being put into practice. How to see, how can you put calamities? What can you do with a calamity? How does the Lam Rim teach you to do that? Do you know, Michelle?
I have lots of calamity.
Okay, well this is a good example. Okay, does the Lam Rim? Is it only that it shows you how shows you the teachings are for instruction, or does it show you how to utilize?
It gives me many opportunities to practice.
So it gives you opportunities to practice. The calamities give us opportunities to practice. Different ways of thinking.
Right.
To see this, actually, this is good. This is burning up my negative karma.
I'm still having trouble with that one.
Burning up negative karma?
Well, yeah, evidently.
Yeah.
But it has allowed me to be more compassionate. And so
excellent. Okay, so that's another, even further, other ways of thinking. Whenever something happens to you.
Right, because I have my neighbor who likes to run over my garden. And, you know.
You told us this before, yeah?
Right, I tell you, he's still running over my garden, but not as often. And
is this because you've been compassionate to them, or what?
I think so. I do prayers for him a lot, you know, and I try not to. And the thing that really is the big hooker is everybody in the neighborhood knows that he runs over the garden, so they come and tell me. And so I had to really like.
You mean runs over in his running shorts or in his car, or
no,
what?
In his car.
Oh, his car.
And so people would come up and say, so-and-so ran over your garden, and I go, yeah, I know. And so I had to learn to try not say negative things about it. You
Good.
know, to try and just go, well, you know, this comes from, he must be suffering about something. If it makes him happy to run over my garden today, well, good.
It's a way to think of it, sure.
Yeah.
Okay, so there's different, Lam Rim gives us ways to not only hear, to understand all the scriptures are instruction for practice, but to see how everything that we experience gives us a chance to practice. You know the story of Milarepa, right? When he had I told this story many times, it's clay bowl. Can you tell the story? You know the story I'm talking about? He had very few possessions, right? Do you know who Milarepa was? Do you know? Do you know, Luis? Have you heard of Milarepa? One Tibetan yogi. Do you know this story? I'm going to tell. He had one of his few possessions. He had a little loin cloth and a meditation belt, and he had a clay bowl in order to make his soup. He would get water down at the stream in the bowl, and he would put in nettles, which were growing outside of his cave. That's why his skin even turned green after some time. Nowadays, you pay a lot for nettle soup, isn't it? If you go down to the health food store. Then it was not considered. It was poor man's food. So he made nettle soup. One day he was going down to get the water, and the bowl dropped on the ground and cracked. All that was left was the inside shape of the nettles. Have you ever can you imagine that? Something so encrusted inside that when the outer shell broke, there was just sort of like a shape of nettles. And instead of getting upset, because he'd been meditating constantly, this is one of the advantages of meditation, familiarity with the teachings. You see everything as instruction. So he saw this as reminding him of the impermanence of this, what did Shakespeare say, this mortal shell, and that there would be something that continues on, the subtle mind. Anyway, I thought you were laughing. Okay. There was the greatness of enabling one to easily find the conqueror's intent, we talked about last time. The intent of the Buddha to lead, even though the teachings, in any particular teaching you have, you may not understand what the Buddha was getting at unless you have had some kind of prior instruction like this to understand what the goal of the Buddhist path is, to lead sentient beings to enlightenment and so forth. So you're able to see what the Buddha's intention is as you study any particular text easily. And the greatness of enabling one to refrain easily, automatically, from the great evil paths, great evil actions, such as what? Abandoning the Dharma, criticizing the bodhisattvas, different great pitfalls like this, being sectarian and so forth. These very, very heavy negative karmas are very easy to create if you're not aware of them. So we talked about that, and then we talked about how to listen and explain the teachings. We haven't finished with that. We talked about how to listen to a teaching, contemplating the benefits. We talked about the great benefits of the jewel-like Dharma, how to develop reverence for the teaching and the instructor, or developing it, maybe we need more help on how to do that. How to actually listen. So we talked about abandoning the three faults of a vessel, and we did talk about relying on the 6 discriminations, right? The 6 ideas. We talked about that last time. Were you here, Tom? And then how to explain a teaching in which both the teaching and the author are great. So I think we'd gotten more or less to hear it. How to explain. So some of you, maybe Venerable Angie or, Venerable Diana or Don, will have to give formal teachings soon. Thea probably. Have you been asked to lead some teaching sometime, Thea?
Some meditation in the morning and some retreat, one retreat here.
Yeah. So Eric, you'll have to sometime give some teachings. So it's good to know how to explain. So contemplating the benefits of explaining the teaching. This has 4 outlines. developing reverence for the teacher, that means the Buddha and the teachings, with what sort of thought and behavior you should explain the teachings, and differentiating between those to whom you should and should not explain the teachings. So this is not too difficult. We'll just go very briefly over this. There are many, many benefits, and you can read and study for a great length of time what these, there are 20 benefits that the Buddha mentioned with regard to teaching. In Geshe Sopa's text, he, relying on some commentaries, he mentions that all of these different benefits could be mentioned in 4 different kinds of effects. You know, when we talk about results, we haven't studied completely, but sometimes in when we talk about karmic results, how many different kinds of karmic results are there possible from one action? 4. Usually in the text they say 3, and one of them is divided into 2, so you have 4. So what are those? What are the?
Throwing karmas of which rebirth you're going to take.
So what's that called? Which kind of effect is that called? Result? It's called the what? Ripening or maturation result, right?
I'm going to have these out of order. Then there's the environmental.
Okay,
what the
environmental
conditions
or dominant result, right?
are. And then the 2 that.
And then there are the effects similar to the cause. Effects that are similar to the cause. So there's two ways that effect can be similar to the cause. Have you heard this before, Louis? So the maturation effect, for instance, if you've created a full path of action, it can actually cause you to be reborn in the lower realms, or if it's a virtuous action, in the upper realms, if it's complete and has certain qualities. That's called the maturation effect. And then there are effects that are similar to the cause. For instance, if you kill, you can have the effect, the result of being killed, even born as a human or being born in somewhere in the desire realm. Say, you could be killed yourself. You've harmed others. You've driven over someone else's lawn in previous lives, and the result of that could be that someone could be going over your lawn. So you can rejoice when they do that. Thinking there's no way that this could happen unless I created the cause. There's another kind of result similar to the cause. Yeah. Another kind of result similar to the cause as what?
Inclination.
As an action. So one is called a result similar to the cause as a what? As experience. That is, you experience some result. And another kind of result similar to the cause as an action means that you might habitually kill. If you've killed in the past, you habitually kill, or if you've run over other people's lawns, you can run over their lawns again, or whatever, you know. You've stolen in the past, so you might steal again now. So sometimes those are divided into 2, but sometimes just counted 1. And then the environmental effect, or the dominant effect, refers to the environment around you where you're born. Maybe it's muddy or dangerous or very serene. That's one of the effects of the actions that you've done in the past, the actual environment that you experience. So sometimes we talk about 3 effects. Then if you talk about these as 3, you can actually add another effect, the effect of separation, which is not a real effect, but like, what do you call it? True cessation. True cessation, remember we were talking many times, is a permanent phenomena. So it's not a real effect, but you could say it's the effect of separation. So if you have a chance to read Geshe Sopa's commentary on this through referring to some other commentaries, he's able to elaborate about these. We won't go over that right now unless you have questions. If you read it and read Geshe-la's commentary, basically the results of teaching with a proper attitude, which hopefully is one that's not interested basically in becoming famous or receiving reverence or high position because you're a teacher. That people that are bowing to you, and you go, yes, bow. Not without these kinds of attitudes, or with the attitude to accumulate money and fame and so forth. There are many great qualities that the Buddha said come about from teaching. So sometimes many great saints, they spend a great deal of their time teaching. It's of course it's motivated out of compassion, but because they also, by teaching, they also accumulate many, many great qualities, a great accumulation of merit that allows them then in meditation to make meditative achievements. So you shouldn't think that you should shun teaching, because actually doing that has many, many great qualities. Here, let's just read a couple, just the names of them. So it is very beneficial to impart the teachings without concern for worldly things, profit, honor, fame, and the like. Just as an aside, when I've talked to some yoga groups sometimes, usually yoga teachers, what's their reason for becoming a yoga teacher? To lead people to moksha? Make money, probably, right? And to, also, part of it is to have a nice lifestyle, a calm lifestyle, and it's probably a lot better than most. But when I've talked to different groups, they're always surprised to try to hear that it's ideal if they can teach with a compassionate attitude without the desire to become famous or to have disciples and so forth. They find that something that doesn't come in their usual kind of teachings. I'm not sure. Ashok, are you listening? Yeah. What do you think? Does that sound like in the yoga?
It's very difficult, I would say.
Yeah. So nowadays, unless one is like one of your close friends is a teacher, right?
Yes.
In the Hindu tradition. So someone like that may have, depends on the person, may have a higher attitude. But oftentimes people who are teaching physical yoga or other kinds of things, like the different courses that go on here, mainly it's a livelihood. And that just doing it in order to make money and to receive respect, because in Asia especially, teachers are accorded much more respect than they are in the West here. Here, a teacher almost can be kind of garbage for some people, right? There is tradition at great universities and great seats of learning where teachers are respected, but in general, people could fall easily into that trap of wanting to have fame and respect and be paid reverence by their students. So as in a text called Exhortation to Wholehearted Resolve, it says, this is a sutra by the Buddha, Maitreya, there are 20 benefits of the generosity with which you give the gift of the teaching without concern for material things, profit, or honor. So His Holiness mentions that many times. If when you're about to teach, if you can try to think, am I really, am I thinking about how much money they're going to give me or how famous I'm going to become, or, oh, the posters are, my pictures on it or whatever, that's something that begins to defile the benefits of the teachings. If you can give the teachings with an attitude of altruism, renunciation, without those kind of concerns, there are 20 benefits. What are they? They are as follows. You will come to have recollection. So that means, obviously, one of the effects of reciting the teachings, preparing for them, reciting to teach them and so forth, is that you have a very good recollection of the teachings. You develop your intelligence, your realization, stability, wisdom, supramundane wisdom. You develop less desire, less hatred, less ignorance, and there's little harm that demons, outer demons, can give you. The Bhagawan Buddhas will think of you as a precious only child. Non-humans will guard you. Non-humans means what? Martians? What does it mean? Curious. What? Pretas, maybe gods also. Different kinds of spirits can be. Deities will bestow charisma and power on you. Enemies will find no opportunity to harm you. Friends will remain steadfast. There's a good one. You will have abundant happiness. Your words will be trusted. You will attain fearlessness. You will have abundant happiness. You'll be praised by the wise, and your gift of teaching will be worthy of remembrance. Here it mentions about charisma. I've mentioned on a couple of occasions before, when the Buddha taught, he reminded the students, don't depend on a teacher just because they're charismatic. Don't rely on the personality of the teacher. Rely on the teaching. Remember when we talked about the four reliances? So that's very important. Sometimes charisma, with the right intention, if when you're teaching, that charisma can help to benefit you, obviously. So we're going to return, having had lots of good questions in the break and some sustenance. So there are different benefits of teaching. So you shouldn't avoid teaching if you have the opportunity, because if you do so with an altruistic intention, not with the intention of becoming rich and famous as a livelihood, it actually creates the karma to achieve enlightenment and liberation and so forth. Then the second outline was developing reverence for the teacher. That means Shakyamuni Buddha and the teaching. So when the Bhagawan, the Buddha, set forth the Prajnaparamita Sutras, the mother of the conquerors, right? That's what is referred to, the mother. He performs such acts as respect as arranging the throne himself. And as Geshe Sopa says, and the commentary is well known, when the first council took place, the monks collected all of the robes of the other monks and made a cushion for the speaker to sit at. So you shouldn't, the tradition, it's not just like an Asian tradition for there to be a throne or a cushion for the teacher to sit at. It's to show reverence to the teaching. Even the Buddha himself made a throne, not so that he could be sitting up higher than everyone else, or everyone else had to bow to him like he was the king, but out of reverence for the teaching. And then what sort of thoughts and behavior you should explain the teaching. So here it's similar to the 6 attitudes we talked about before. You should think of that the Dharma is the medicine, and the disciples, the people that you're talking to, are like sick people, like patients. Do we often think of ourselves? Do you think of yourself as sick? Yeah. Chronically. Okay, you guys are probably more healthy in that sense. Someone else might say, what a bunch of neurotic people. They think they're sick. Don't they know? We have the sickness of the delusion since beginningless time. If we recognize that, so when we're teaching, we try to think of that others are in that position. The Dharma is the medicine, and we try to think of ourselves as the dispenser of that medicine, how to use it, how to take it. And what does it say here? In general, it says, with regard to your thought, develop 5 ideas set forth in the questions of Sargaramati Sutra. Think of yourself as a doctor, the teachings as medicine, those listening to the teachings as sick persons, and the Tathagatas as excellent beings, and wish that the teachings remain for a long time. It's not the only wish. That's kind of like the dedication, a special dedication for teachings. When you're giving teachings and receiving teachings, is that, remember when we talked about the 6 attitudes, the last one was wishing, discriminating that the teachings last a long time. It's kind of like this special dedication That's not the only way you can dedicate the merits, but in particular for teaching, because if you really, after some period of time of encountering the teachings and putting them into practice in your own life, you begin to see the only thing that really protects sentient beings are not the gross national product, not Microsoft, not better highways, microwave ovens, I don't know, the American military, heaven forbid. None of these things really protect. The only thing that really protects sentient beings are the teachings that they can actualize. So to pray that the teachings not degenerate, both the doctrine of scriptural doctrine and the realizational doctrine, that has a very special purpose. So in many of the cases when we have teachings, one of the dedications is may the teachings last a long time. Are you familiar with some dedications like that? What can you think of the words? What can you think?
The teachings remain forever.
The teachings forever, okay, something like that. Okay, so like in the...
Or may we never be separated from the teachings.
Yeah, sometimes maybe never be separated from gurus or the teachings in all our lifetimes and so forth. But in particular, may the teachings spread to... There's one of the special great dedications is may the teachings spread to wherever, the light of the Dharma spread to wherever the darkness it is not spread before in the universe because of these merits. And where it has spread, may it intensify and grow stronger. A little bit like the prayer of that we say for bodhicitta, Jangchub Semcho Grimpoche. May the bodhicitta take root in the minds of those where it has not taken root, and where it has taken root, may it not decline but grow more and more. Also, just in terms of the doctrine. Also, when we talk about Lama Tsongkhapa's doctrine and the Buddha's doctrine, there's various prayers for the blazing of the doctrine. May it blaze forever. There's a great purpose of that when you think of it. If the understanding of the teachings of patience and love and compassion, altruism, and especially the very special understanding of emptiness, if those teachings disappeared from the world, we'd be in deep doo-doo, as George Bush once said, right? George Bush, do you remember that? George Bush Sr.? Pat, you okay? No. Okay. It's okay. No, it's all right. So, with what sort of thoughts and behavior you should explain the teachings, you should also cultivate love for those that have gathered to listen. Love means what? Wanting them to be free of suffering? Love means wanting them to be endowed with happiness, so wishing them to have happiness. Give up jealousy that fears the superiority of others. So, when we talk about the various chakras and everything, we talk about one of the chakras associated with miserliness, and miserliness is also related with pride. That same chakra is related with blockage of pride, because if you're very proud, rather than giving up something, you will keep it in order to keep your position. Even the teachings, if you have a lot of pride. So there can be a kind of miserliness that can prevent one from actually sharing the teachings with others because of your pride, your position. You don't want others to end up having the kind of notoriety or the position that you have. It can also be with physical possessions and everything like that. Here,
What chakra?
Pardon?
What chakra is it related to?
What chakra? What chakra? I don't know. Maybe the navel chakra, something like that. So some blockage. And so sometimes it mentions pride. Sometimes it also mentions miserliness. The two are related, miserliness and pride. You can see there's a relationship. If you notice yourself being miserly, you might investigate sometime the relationship with pride. Or if you notice yourself being proud, you might investigate the relationship with miserliness. Give up jealousy that fears the superiority of others. So, for instance, if you feel jealous that others might be superior to you, that can be a hindrance also in sharing the teachings. Give up the laziness of procrastination. The dispiritedness, the discouragement of being tired due to explaining something again and again.
We're helping you with your karma.
Yes.
Okay. So give up the discouragement of being discouraged when you have to explain something. One of the qualities of Mahayana Guru is not to be discouraged, even if one has to explain it again and again. So parents can recognize that, isn't it? You know? Praising.
Well, they can, but do they?
Yeah. Okay. Right. I'm not sure. Praising yourself and listing the faults of others, is that something you should do as a good teacher? No, you should avoid doing that. You should give up praising yourself and listing the faults of others. You should give up stinginess with regard to explaining the teachings, that's the miserliness we were talking about, and give up concern for material things such as food and clothing. Then think, just this merit from teaching in order that others and I attain Buddhahood is a favorable condition for my happiness. To be satisfied with that much, with having created merit from giving the teachings. So, I won't go into all these other details. Yeah, Tom?
You were talking about yoga teachers.
Yeah, not just yoga teachers, but they were surprised to hear this.
Probably you were talking about certain kinds of yoga teachers that have particular quality you were talking about. Not all yoga teachers, but ones that were teaching simply to acquire position or money. Correct?
Yeah, I studied with one
I
of
had a
the...
question about that.
Okay, I studied with one of the great yoga teachers, Hatha yoga teachers in India for 3 months after I finished teaching Lama Osel at Sarah a couple of years ago. I asked Lama Sopa Rinpoche his permission, and he said, "It will be very good for your body, but it won't help your mind. But it won't help your mind."
It wasn't about the yoga teacher or the yoga. It was really about you.
Mysore, India.
It was about, can they really, isn't that a negative action to set out to like teach yoga in order to gain money and to gain?
Well, everyone needs...
So how could that ever succeed if they have that motivation? How could it look like?
Well, see, most people...
They're, doing it selfishly, but making a lot of money. How does that happen? If it's a negative motivation and a negative action, how could it be leading to them having the happiness of money and position?
Because many times, say a mafia person can have karma ripening from other lifetimes. They steal something, they get the car, and they rob the bank, and no one catches them this lifetime. They die, and they're, you know. How does that happen? What does it say? How do good things happen to bad people? Or why do bad things happen to good people? Because of karma. The action that they're creating now is not the cause of their happiness now. It's only a condition. Like, for instance, if you cheat and steal, that can become a condition for virtuous karma that you created in the past to ripen. The karma to have a car. You instead of buying it, you steal it. If you don't have the karma to do that, you steal it, and as soon as you think it's mine, the police got their hand on your... Okay, you're going to jail. So the actions that we do right now are not the main cause of the results that occur right now. That's why karma is very hidden. That's why a lot of people don't believe in karma.
Yes.
Okay? They don't understand the possibility of the connectedness, that the actions that we create now can be conditions. Say we work hard right now. That can be a condition if we have the karma to be wealthy or famous or educated. That can be the condition for that other karma to ripen. But in our working hard right now, depends on how we work, with a good attitude, a good motivation, we create the karma for future lifetimes.
So, say for instance, I thought I want $1,000.
Did you?
And so I got a gun. I thought the only way for me to get $1,000 to get ahead is to get a gun and go to the local convenience store, point the gun at the guy
Canadian
behind
store?
the counter and say, convenience store.
Oh, convenience store.
Supermarket. Point the gun at the guy and say, give me all the money out of the cash register. And then he gives me the money. And then I leave. And I
Right.
get away with it.
Right,
Apparently.
and
apparently.
right, so the-
Is what you're saying that
So it's an illusion.
simultaneously, like, the reason he gave me the money wasn't because I had the gun.
The reason he gave you the money was because you had the gun.
No, that wasn't.
But that
could
wasn't,
never be
that was a
reason. I
condition.
threatening
That
him.
was the condition. The
How could that
main
be the
reason,
if it-
there are two different things that are necessary.
That would be getting a good result from.
Okay,
making
listen,
this-
hold on. Say,
Think you go.
is that what they go?
Time out, yeah.
Time out, okay, just relax now, okay. There are two things that are necessary. I'll give an example. Say Pat and I want to have a nice, we want to have a medicinal garden, with beautiful fruits, trees, and medicinal plants and everything. Good idea, right? So we need, not only do we need a, say for instance, we have a plot of land and we plant the seeds, because we know they have to be the seeds, you have to create the karma, right? And we're waiting and nothing comes up. And then Diana comes by and says, but listen guys, did you water the stuff? Did you put in some fertilizer? Did you put in the cooperative conditions? Is there any sunlight? You've got big plastic tarps over it, black plastic tarp. You guys are dumb. And Pat and I go, yeah, duh. So you need cooperative conditions also for karma to ripen. Say, for instance, we may have the karma to be born as a brontosaurus right now, but there's no brontosaurus eggs, fertilized eggs that we can enter into, at least in this world system, so that karma cannot ripen right now. We can have, sometimes without very much outer condition at all, some karma can be so powerful that it doesn't need much outer condition. And it can ripen. We can, when the time comes for you to die, even if a car doesn't come to hit you, or you don't drop, the plane doesn't crash or something, something's going to happen.
Yes.
Something. Okay. So when the person who is holding the gun, they're creating a cooperative condition out of fear. Not a very good cooperative condition. That's not the only way the karma to have that $1,000 could have ripened. Had they worked, if they got the $1,000 and they got away with it, they might have had the karma to earn that $1,000. But the illusion in their mind was this was the main cause. This was just a condition for that virtuous karma to ripen. They've lost that karma now. And instead of having that karmic seed, to have $1,000 in their mind, having it ripened, they've created the karma for negative things in the future, because the condition that they chose to ripen that karma was one based on, anger and selfishness and negative mind, miserliness, aggression, and so forth, danger.
And they got a plantain tree.
They got a plantain tree instead of a annual tree or something like that.
Yeah, I agree with you. I just,
I'm glad.
the trouble I have is it still seems like one of the conditions is the gun.
It is a condition. It definitely is a condition. But there's a difference between cause. Look at one of the conditions. Let's say there's a difference between conditions and causes. In general, causes and conditions are synonymous. But in general, specifically, we can say a cause is something that, say, for instance, the substantial cause. The substantial cause of receiving a particular result is the karmic seed that we've created before. Without that, it could never happen at all. Even no matter how many guns you brought out, or how much water and fertilizer you put on the lawn, or how much you worked for a particular job, if you didn't have the karmic seed, none of them would bear fruit. Whereas, so there's a difference between condition and cause. Whereas if a cause is incredibly powerful, it can ripen even with very, very little outside effect. Say, for instance, you've never worked anything in your life, and you've never done anything good, and suddenly, somehow you find out your uncle Charlie leaves you $10,000 a year. You know, it's some karma. You know, you didn't do anything right now. Or you could say, well, like you were born to relationship to Uncle Charlie or something like that. Let me go on. Let me go on. This is a question for karma later, but it's a good question.
Well, I was in relation to the yoga teachers.
Okay. Okay.
Because it seemed to me the way it was presented that it might appear. I don't think the teachings are making it appear that way.
No. Well, look if you look today in the yoga community, look in the yoga community, most people that engage in yoga, it is not done to achieve liberation, moksha. That's what it was. The real aim in the past, the path of hatha yoga, was one that was supposed to lead to this kind of spiritual, liberation. Even the people who are the big practitioners in the West, and might even be considered, that they have a certain status of being gurus, their purpose is pretty much centered toward this lifetime. Even the gurus who teach it, the Indian gurus, what's his name? Who are the big ones? Iyengar and Pattabhi Jois, these very wonderful people, but they're very much centered in not necessarily leading people to liberation, it seems, because they don't actually teach the methods overtly, unless they're very highly realized and they're leaving seeds for people to be receptive to this in future lives. Mainly people do it to look buff, if they're just practitioners. Is that the right term? To get buff, to look good, to feel good, which is, from a worldly perspective, not bad. But it's not necessarily a spiritual perspective at all, unless you were doing that to have a healthy body so that you could practice the Dharma, so that you could be attractive for others, so others would respond to you dharmically. Then that takes a completely different perspective. But that may not be why most people do it. Then the teachers, many of the people do it, perhaps teaching as a livelihood. Well, you need a livelihood. Right? Most people need a livelihood, but when you're teaching something spiritual like that, or like the Dharma teachings, as a livelihood, thinking to get fame and resources, you don't get the karmic benefits of having done so with its altruistic intention that creates the karma for future lifetimes of having these many benefits. That's the point. Okay.
Likewise, for example, there are meditation teachers that are teaching meditation so that people can focus better at their jobs and be more relaxed.
Yeah.
It's not the same as teaching meditation as a spiritual endeavor.
I believe that's one of the big misunderstandings today. People think everything is just meditation. It's meditation, but there's a big difference in the motivation behind it. Even if the people have a method, which is authentic, which oftentimes it's just an amalgam, a combination of different things they've picked up from different traditions, their own pistache, their own kind of mixture. And it's not necessarily going to be beneficial for the students in the long run. It can be kind of charismatic because you hear things that you like to hear sometimes from teachers like that, and not necessarily actual Dharma. Sometimes Dharma can be at first can be very painful. It's like lancing a boil, but in order to cure the sickness, you have to sometimes resort to something that might be temporarily painful. You might have to give up your afflictions, your attachment to things, which temporarily can seem very painful. Oh, I want to go to the party. I want to have my boyfriends and girlfriends. I want to have these drugs. I want to have fame. So you give up these things for some time. It could be very, very painful, but it can have a very beneficial result in the long term. Whereas the worldly teachers today, that's not their intention. So then differentiating between those to whom you should and should not explain the teachings. So basically, you shouldn't explain teachings unless you have been requested. Usually even 3 times, unless the people, the people are ready and suitable. Like if someone just comes to, oh, okay, you're a Buddhist, give a teaching. You're at they're at the cocktail party and they sit you down, and that's not the right situation to give the teaching. In fact, it could be very much a cause of pride, isn't it?
You just happen to have a couple of cushions here, could you?
Yeah, right. And just have a couple of cushions, and here, let me show you how to meditate, as I learned in the Himalayas, or as I learned at the Buddhist Center in the Redwoods. Himalayas. One of my teachers, Serkon Senshab Rinpoche, one of the Senshab means, Senshab is an individual who would be sort of like the debating partner or co-study partner of a holy being. Senshab Rinpoche was the debating partner, study partner of the Dalai Lama. So many of the high lamas have Senshabs. Like Kirti Senshab Rinpoche is the Senshab of Kirti Rinpoche, who you don't know probably unless you've been to India, Kirti Rinpoche, or to Tibet. So not every lama had Senshabs. Usually very, very high lamas had Senshabs. So Serkon Senshab Rinpoche was a very great being. And I remember once when he came to give a talk at Kopan and the monastery, and just to sort of answer questions, just to give a talk. And at first he came up, he was very, very humble. He looked a little bit like, or quite a bit like, Yoda. Do you know Yoda? And in fact, as I understand it, George Lucas actually based Yoda on the face of Serkon Rinpoche. So this is kind of interesting. Anyway, maybe that's not so interesting. So he's up on the throne, and he says at first, he says, I don't know why I'm up here. I don't know anything. And you people are all educated. You've had college education. I'm just a simple monk. There's nothing I can really tell you. And then some people were sort of looking at their watch, and they got up and walked out. Maybe that's very good sometimes, because those people are not necessarily ready to hear the teachings. So Rinpoche repeated this several times, then finally acquiesced to talk a little bit about the Dharma, and very, very profoundly. But this is something, here, as it says, the King of Concentration Sutras, the Samadhi Raja Sutra, something that you can find translations of. In that it says, should someone request you to bestow the teachings, first say, I'm not trained extensively. Then say, you are knowledgeable and wise. How can I explain the teachings to one as great as you? Do not impart the teachings casually, but only after you have investigated whether the listener is a suitable recipient. If you know that the listener is a suitable recipient, explain the teachings even without a request. So it's not as though you only give teachings if you've been requested 3 times. You can also give the teachings if you have some knowledge that these people are already cultivated. Say they're already students of the Dharma, and they need a particular continuity of their teaching and so forth. You don't have to receive a request from them like that.
So how do you know that we're suitable recipients?
I don't know. Maybe I'm creating negative karma here. Maybe because my teacher has, Lama Zopa Rinpoche has asked me to teach. So what do they say? What do they say in the movies? It's a request you can't refuse or something like that. No, I'm just joking. Okay. How a session should be concluded in relation to both hearing and explaining the teachings. So again, to dedicate the virtues from the teacher's point of view for the temporal and final aims. And so we'll leave there on that section. What I wanted to start today, do we have how much time do we have? Have half an hour, okay. What I wanted to start today is the next outline, the actual outline, how to lead the students with the actual instructions. That's the 4th main outline, okay? So this has two outlines. How to rely on the teacher, the root of the path. So there's always a debate whether it means the teacher is the root of the path or the reliance is the root of the path. What do you think? Don, what do you think? Is the teacher, when it says how to rely on the teacher, the root of the path, is that even in English, is that, what is it? What is it? Does it sound like the teacher or does it sound like the reliance? Maybe it's the reliance. Huh? Anyway, so it's something for you to think about. In the other outline, this is A. The other outline is what? Where's B? The stages of how to lead the students. The stages of how the students train their minds after they have relied on the teacher. So this one, how to lead the students with the actual instructions, has two. One part is how to rely on the teacher, the guru, the root of the path, and then the stages of how the students train their minds after they have relied on the teacher. So this is, when you have the various glance meditations on the Lam Rim, like the Foundation of All Good Qualities or the glance meditation at the end of Lama Chopa, this is the first verse of them usually refers to guru devotion. Okay, all of the different ones. So this is essentially what's sometimes called guru devotion, or here it says reliance. Lama la tempa. Tempa, in this case, is a verb that means to stay close to rely on, to depend on, or to devote oneself to. It can mean both, sort of a symbiotic relationship, that you're doing something for serving the guru and devoting oneself to the guru, and also relying upon them, staying close to the guru. Most of the Tibetan lamas see this as one of the most important subjects in the whole Lam Rim, whereas for us Westerners, it's something that's a little bit foreign, because we have so many experiences. What was it, Jonestown? Who was it some years ago? Jim Jones?
Yeah.
Remember Jim Jones? What is it? Vimal, do you remember?
How was the Kool-Aid?
Pardon?
How was the Kool-Aid?
How was the Kool-Aid? Yeah, right. How was the Kool-Aid? Do you know who Jim Jones was, Ashok?
Yes, I heard about it.
You heard?
It's 10 years ago.
10 years? It was more than that, wasn't it?
What, ago?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Was that 20 years?
10 years ago.
20, 23. Yeah, it was a long time ago. But so people are naturally, so those of you who don't know, do you know who Jim Jones was?
Yes,
Charismatic teacher, kind of quasi-Christian, was it?
I think.
Some kind of New Age Christian thing. And people saw him as they didn't use the word guru, but saw them as their guiding teacher, and ended up committing suicide together. How many were there? Hundreds? 1,200. Something like some large number. So one has to be very, very careful, because the person who teaches one is going to have a very great influence. How they teach you, what their motivation is, whether they teach you correctly. There are many things to talk about. Just to give you some general idea, it's said that even in the world today, if you whatever your profession is, if you're a carpenter or a computer programmer or photographer or gardener, like Michelle. Michelle, would you call yourself a gardener?
I'm not a gardener, I'm a painter.
You're a painter with a garden.
With a garden.
Whatever vocation or activity that you take up, even for worldly things, you need some kind of guide. Of course, certain things you can learn by yourself. You might have learned how to do something just from a book without having any kind of personal interaction. But usually people who are adept at something, like, say, cooking, great chefs and so forth, study with other teachers. it's said that if, even for worldly things, you need a guide. Say, for instance, you're going to a foreign country, and you're going to a very dangerous place, a place you've never gone before. You have to seek out some kind of guide, someone who's been there before, who can show you the terrain, who can lead you past the pitfalls and lead you quickly to your destination. Certainly, even if in the world you need something like that, for a journey that we have never completed before, spiritual journey, there's no doubt that we need a guide, spiritual friend, guru, to point out the direction. So that's not the only reason. It's actually the Buddha himself gave this example. Even himself being, from a Mahayana perspective, already being an enlightened being, when he manifested on earth, pretending to be Prince Siddhartha, taking that aspect. From a Mahayana perspective, he'd already attained enlightenment in the past. But when he left home, he first sought out the greatest teachers of the time and studied with them. Okay? So we ourselves need to find some kind of spiritual friend like that. Sometimes one doesn't have to accept every single instructor as a guru, because the person or persons that one accepts and thinks of as one's guru, one has a very heavy karmic relationship with. Some of the teachers have explained a little bit like this. If you see your teacher as perfect, there are very, very powerful repercussions of that, very powerful blessings. Say, for instance, if you think, Buddha is my teacher, Shakyamuni. You read the sutras, you take everything that Buddha said as your teaching. Someone that you consider to be a perfect person, the Tathagata, the omniscient one. Very powerful. Also, if you think Christ is my guru, I mentioned this before. In India some years ago, I remember reading a book, small book by some kids that came from America, I think, in the age of experimenting in India and gurus and everything. And they were Christians, and they wrote a book called, I think it was called Christ is My Guru. And they began to read the New Testament again, thinking that this was actually Christ, the perfect being, was actually their teacher. And I think they had some very good experiences. So there's very powerful blessings if the teacher that you take is you view them as a perfect being, and indeed they are reputable. On the other hand, there's very quick blessings and very quick, something more rapid about having a living teacher, someone who can say, don't do that, do this, according to the context. You read the scriptures, either the sutras or the Bible or whatever you're thinking of as your guide. There's not something that's telling you particularly. You can maybe make generalizations, but it's not telling you about your particular situation. But a physical teacher or guide now, friend, is someone who can tell you, don't do that, do this. There's problems with that, follow this. So it's said that if your teacher is a living being, there are very quick blessings, especially if the teacher is a qualified teacher. What if you put the two together? If your teacher is someone who's living and you see them as perfect, like manifestation of Buddha, you receive both powerful and quick blessings. That's one of the advantages, I think. Maybe not, I'm not sure if it's stated exactly in here, but some of this is the teachers teach sometimes. This is one of the reasons why it's possible to make realizations in one lifetime by following a spiritual teacher, devoting oneself or relying upon the spiritual guide. So one has to think, as one of my teachers, Geshe Darga, used to say, I think you actually find you find in the teachings, but as it was translated something like, when you think about it, you weigh up in your mind whether you can do this or whether you want to do this. And one of the first things you think is, do I want to succeed or do I want to fail on the spiritual path? You know? And you look at the past, all of the great beings that have succeeded, all at the beginning, evaluated like this. They need to, I'm just a beginner. I'm a doofus. I don't know, what can you say? Jerk?
Doofus is good.
Doofus is okay. I need a guide. And I want it, and in order to succeed, I need a guide because I'm going in territory I've never gone before. Even if maybe in previous lifetimes I might feel that I've got some, I've tread the path to some degree, even if I have some kind of spiritual confidence like that, or arrogance, depends on how it is. I haven't finished the path. And there's to finish this path, to know how to go is like an unknown territory. So I need a guide. I want to succeed. So this is sort of like the first thing to think about. I want to succeed. I don't want to fail. So I, as the great beings in the past have done, I'm going to start to investigate whether it's possible, to follow a spiritual guide, because supposedly it's profitable. Great beings in the past have said that it's profitable. How is it possible to see a teacher, a living teacher, even the Dalai Lama? You might say, well, the Dalai Lama, I read some article in the Canadian newspaper, and they were criticizing the Dalai Lama. He has these faults. He hangs out with Hollywood stars, or, he eats meat sometimes, and I don't know. They'd say all these different kinds of criticisms, different kinds of faults. So even the Buddha is one of the Buddha's attendant before Ananda, didn't see that the Buddha had any special qualities other than having a little bit bigger aura than some other people, didn't have the karma to see that. So how can you possibly see a teacher today as having qualities like this? Because in order to follow a guru, let's say to have these twofold advantage of having a living teacher and someone who you see as perfect, how can you do that? Have those twofold qualities? Well, in the same way, when you really like someone, your kitty cat or your boyfriend, your girlfriend, you fall in love, or yourself, you only see the good qualities, isn't it? When you think about yourself, of course, maybe we have our neurotic times too, but generally we view ourselves and those that we like. We don't focus on the faults. Say, for instance, when a couple first comes together, everything is golden. They think everything. Oh, they have such nice little habits, little idiosyncrasies. Later, if they fall out of disfavor with you, those idiosyncrasies become big, what do you call them? Grate on your nerves, Do you know what I'm saying? Yep. He's an experienced man.
I could write a book.
You can write a book? Was that 3-time loser, 4-time loser? Okay. So the point is, the example that's given is like this. Say the friends, when you have a friend or you're viewing yourself, you view the qualities mainly, like seeing the sun, and all other faults, little imperfections, become unobservable, like the stars in the daylight. The sunlight sort of overpowers all of the light from the, well, of course, there's other reasons, the light's reflecting off the sky, but you don't see the stars during the day in general, right? I mean, you see Venus with the sun still up sometime, but in general, you don't see the stars because something is so bright. So if you focus in the same way, you can think it is possible to see a guru that way by focusing on their qualities. That's one. So here's sort of one of the crux, sort of the essential points. Not to view the faults of the guru, but by constantly going back and looking at their qualities, which has to be from the basis of a qualified person, real qualities, qualities that are suitable to be imputed or designated as the qualities of an enlightened being or teacher. So viewing those again and again, thinking of their kindness and their good qualities and so forth, then whatever other things that might ordinarily arise and be seen as faults, you're able to transform and actually see as qualities. Is that possible? So, for instance, they look like they're getting angry sometime. And you have a feeling that they are perfect. So you think this is their skillful means to help to purify the karma of that person they're getting angry at, or at me. One of the great Kadampa Geshes, I think one of his students was worried how he was constantly scolded by his guru and how the other disciples were scolded by this other guru. And he went to this Kadampa teacher, and the teacher said, when the guru scolds me, I think of it as, when he beats me, I think of it as a tantric empowerment. When he scolds me, I think of it as the transmission of mantra, some great blessing, some purification. So if you look at the practice of the great practitioners of the past, Milarepa, other people who practiced guru devotion, who made realizations in one lifetime, they were able to see their guru as perfect. Now, how is it possible? Okay, so maybe it's possible to imagine this, the guru as perfect. What benefit would there be if the guru, you were thinking of them as perfect, but they weren't perfect? I said, maybe they've got good qualities, they're qualified, and they're not like Jim Jones or something like this. How is it that you'd benefit from this? What special benefit? Well, the Buddha said, in the future, in the degenerate age, I will appear. All you have to do is recognize me. So definitely the Buddha is appearing in the world today as teachers. Bodhisattvas are appearing. It would be totally, contradictory for the Buddha to have achieved enlightenment out of great compassion for sentient beings to be not appearing in the world today. So maybe some of our gurus are actual emanations of Buddhas. Some of them may not be actual emanation of Buddhas, but are suitable to be for us because maybe we don't have the karma to meet actual emanation of Buddha. Maybe we do. We don't know. The way that one creates the karma to be in the presence of an actual emanation of Buddha is by training in that way, seeing one's spiritual teachers as enlightened beings. That's one of the karmic causes to actually have teachers in the future, actually be taught by Manjushri, to be taught by Avalokiteshvara. Okay? How does it happen? Does it just happen suddenly? Or you make, Manjushri sort of looks at you and says, oh, I like Eric, I'm going to be his teacher. No, you have to have some karmic connection. You have to create the karma for that. Also, the Buddha said, even if the teacher in the future is not a Buddha, by the student in tantric teachings, if the student considers them to Buddha as the Tathagata, I will enter into their being, I will enter into the teacher and bestow blessings. So, say for instance, say your teacher is actually Buddha, and you just think of them as, like when you're teenagers, right? Your parents, oh yeah, my parents, big problem, You just think of your guru as always, giving you more problems or something like that. Even if they're the Buddha, you receive no blessings whatsoever. Blessings depend on your opening of your own mind. Whereas if the person is not the Buddha, but you see them as Buddha, and they are teaching actual qualified teachings, they have some of the qualities of a Mahayana guru, by seeing them as Buddha, you open up your heart to the teaching, to the blessings of Buddha. You actually receive the blessings of the Buddha. Does that make some sense? So it is, we want to succeed, we don't want to fail, so we have to consider the possibility. All of the great beings of the past have relied on spiritual guides. It's a destination, the spiritual journey is not something that we've done before. It's very, very subtle. There's all sorts of pitfalls. In this degenerate age, the guru is, if the Buddhas appear, they don't appear only in some grandiose, perfect way. We don't have the karma to see them. You know, why isn't it, you might say, excuse me. Is that what the people say? That's what you say. Excuse me. I saw, there was some news report about the Puerto Rican mom whose son has been imprisoned by the United States government for a year now as a terrorist, the bomb terrorist. Do you remember? Did you read about that? I think some of the things she was saying, the FBI came to me and I said, excuse me. Something like that. She might say, well, excuse me, if Buddha's here, why doesn't he come? You know, in your Monakai, come to Times Square. There's lots of people there. You could just come and give teachings. We don't have the karma, you know? And there would be no benefit. People's minds are not ripened. So the Buddhas will appear as, according to the karma of sentient beings. Remember the story of Atisha? Maitreya appeared, Asanga. Maitreya appeared to Asanga first as a dog, festering with wounds and so forth. First he couldn't even see anything. Then he saw Maitreya this way. Maybe we're in a little better situation. Maybe we can see our gurus as human beings, you know. So you can't judge whether a guru is an enlightened being with the ordinary mind, because one of the things you have to use again and again if the doubts rise, that can't be Buddha, they make mistakes or whatever, our own perceptions are unreliable. I remember Lama Yeshe talking very much about this in terms of shunyata and other things. Just think of the mistakes that we make every day. We think someone's our friend, later we find out they've been cheating us all along. Or vice versa, we thought someone didn't like us, later we found out that they were pining for our friendship. Or we think it's to go one way and it turns out it's exactly the wrong way. Have you ever done that on the road? We did that. We thought this is the quick way, and then we went with the, yeah, okay. So even in worldly things, our perceptions, you know, can't be relied on. Same thing with the spiritual guide. So the Buddha, you know, you can't judge from your own perceptions whether someone is really a Buddha. Also, you can think, if this person who is appearing here, say, Kriti Senja Rinpoche, Dalai Lama, whoever one takes as spiritual guide, if this is not the Buddha, if they're not actually Buddha, who is? Buddha's supposed to be here teaching. If they're not Buddha, who is? Sometimes in Tibet, people that lived in very isolated places had their own teachers, maybe not very educated. Their teachers, maybe not, they never went to Lhasa or studied in the monasteries or even did retreats. But they had reverence for them as their guru, and they made great spiritual strides because of that, by seeing them as their guru, by practicing reliance on the teacher. So that's what we're going to be talking about. How much time do we have, Ashok? Are we doing?
8 minutes.
We have 8 minutes.
10 minutes left.
Okay.
Quick question.
Yeah.
I mean, so one of the, you know, things that dissuades me from, you know, accepting people in that way is the thought that they might be teaching me some instruction that's incorrect, and that I might be diligently following it even though it's wrong. You know, if we can accept a teacher like that as perfect and accept those instructions, is it, you know, is there any problem with practicing a wrong instruction or a mistake in?
Well, that's why the teacher that you follow, you have to check for a long time. You shouldn't just accept someone just because they're famous or they have lots of disciples or...
Even a good teacher might occasionally make a mistake, right? So,
Right? But when we, even they may teach something not in its entirety, one might say. I remember Serkon Senchab Rinpoche used to say, if one Buddha comes and teaches, they may not teach everything in its entirety, but the Buddhas coming after that will teach, will fill in the gaps. Many times we receive teachings from one teacher. You know, I received teachings from Geshe Nawan Darge on Majjhimaka, and just because of the situation, not every point was covered. Later, by studying those points, filling in all the gaps, even if I didn't understand right, even if the translation wasn't right, whatever, there was some foundation that was laid by seeing them as a perfect being, then preparing for later, when other teachings, those doubts can be resolved. Usually teachers, like Geshe Tekchok, Japa Tekchok, who was our teacher at Manjushri Institute for some years. Later, he was the abbot of Nalanda for many years. Then he was asked to be the abbot of Sarah J. He just recently retired, so he's the Kensur, the former abbot now of Sarah J. Kensur is a title that means former abbot. Geshe-la used to say, once in a while I may make some mistake. This is how it was translated by the translator. He said, once in a while I may make some mistake, but I'll never make a blooper. The translator had picked up some American slang. I don't know I wasn't paying attention to what Geshe-la said, you know. So, in general, you know, even the Buddhas might appear to make some grammatical mistakes. Even if you listen to the Dalai Lama, he may come back in another day and say, oh, I made a mistake there, or this or that, or in this part of my life I did this. Even Lama Tsong Khapa changed his apparent position on points as he grew older. So one shouldn't think, in general, if one checks and the teacher has the qualities of a Mahayana guru, main thing is the motivation. Like Atisha came to Tibet motivated out of bodhicitta, and this had such a strong effect on his teachings, the longevity, all the benefit that sprung out of that tradition in Tibet, that came into all four Tibetan traditions, because they all revere the teachings of Atisha, Kadampas, the Kadampa Geshes, and so forth. Even when you're following a teacher, if they propose something that either you think is wrong or that you feel you can't do, no problem. You can just come respectfully and say, I can't do that. There's no onus upon a disciple in Buddhism that you have to do. So that's one part of the question. The other part of the question might be, well, maybe they're telling me to do something that I think is right, but actually is wrong. So you have to check. They have to be well versed in the teachings. They have to have studied them for a long time, and there has to be a certain kind of validation from not just your own assumption, but from their own teachers, that they're accepted as a valid guide. You know? So all of these different points now, as we start studying this, there'll be a lot of different things that will come up and doubts, but this is very important. Let me ask Luis first. Do you have a question? No. Tell me.
Will you please forgive me for being arrogant earlier and getting a little carried away? I'm very sorry.
Oh, no problem.
Thank you.
That was the okay. Lisa.
So this thing about checking out the teacher for a long time, with the instances or certain situations where one meets a teacher and for one reason or another just knows, it doesn't seem to me as though there's really any reason to keep checking out if one just knows.
Well, it depends. When you say one knows, maybe it's just a very strong, one has to still check to a certain degree. Sometimes it may be just very strong infatuation. It's just like sometimes you meet a lover in the world, right? Bear with me for a second. Like say you meet some gal or guy and you say, I just know they're my soulmate. And maybe sometimes, in some cases, there are people that remain together for a whole lifetime. But with respect to gurus, it can be sometimes that you can meet someone who you have a karmic relationship with from previous lives, and you can have a very strong connection like that. But it's still important to check in the same way, because it is possible to, due to charisma, a person's charisma, the karma ripening, to be viewed as very important and influential and powerful and charismatic. But that isn't necessarily a proper quality of a Mahayana guru. So still have to check, but there is a certain amount of sign like that. You don't necessarily have to force yourself to follow a teacher that you don't have any feeling for. Even if you have many instructors, you don't have to necessarily see them all as your guru. As we'll see as we study this section, hopefully you can read the section on relying on the teacher, which is quite a hefty section, but just to read this for next time. It's not that long. And we'll talk about it in more detail. One of the things Lama Tsongkhapa said, other gurus said, in this degenerate age, for people like ourselves who have very easily see faults in teachers and so forth, and very difficult to develop faith at all, it's better to have few gurus, and the gurus that you actually rely on should be those that you have a karmic connection with, that very easily you can develop this unshakable faith that they are, really enlightened being and so forth. Otherwise, like Atisha had some 153 or something gurus, all of whom he saw as enlightened beings. Can you do that? It's hard for us, even to see one person as enlightened being. Maybe some people can. Maybe they can see the Dalai Lama as an enlightened being, or Lama Zopa Rinpoche, Trudgen Rinpoche as an enlightened being. But one of the disciplines is to also to see, as say when one is in an isolated place in Tibet, the Lama of one's room, when one was in one's housing place, one might actually see as a guru also. This is the person who is this is how the Buddha is manifesting for me. I can have a relation. I can't go see the Dalai Lama very often, if at all, to ask my questions. I can receive teachings from them, read their teachings, but I can't actually ask them everyday things. I can't make them a cup of coffee or give them a foot massage. I'm not in the retinue of the Dalai Lama.
But could you still consider him a teacher?
Who? Dalai Lama?
Dalai Lama.
Sure. And but what I'm saying is, even if you have some teachers that you feel is very strong, they are perfect kind of thing, still that you shouldn't let that predispose you or prevent you from seeing the possibility of others that might seem to be more mundane as actual gurus also. So what do we say?
Finishing up the tape.
Okay, so you have to give me like 5-minute warnings.
Oh, I didn't.
Oh, okay. It's okay. So we're going to quit here. We're just going to do a dedication, and then I'll answer your question afterwards. Okay.
Okay.
Thank you. So, whatever merits that we've created tonight, just as was taught in the teachings, to try to dedicate them to the longevity of the pure, peerless teachings of the Buddha, the sole source of happiness of sentient beings, the sole direction of sentient beings, without sounding sectarian, if you think about it, as you study the teachings more and more. Due to these merits, may the precious Dharma spread to where it has never spread before, both in space, time, and in the minds of sentient beings, and where it has spread but degenerated, may it be reinvigorated. Where it has spread and taken root, may it only increase more and more due to these merits. And try to seal the dedication in the emptiness of the 3 spheres, the merits, the goal dedicated to, and the act of dedication. All empty of true existence, merely labeled, not findable as they appear out of the karmic appearance that appears to our senses, but still function.